Curiosities about defensive mimicry in animals. Number 9. What is it? Defensive mimicry in animals is a type of camouflage in which one species takes on the characteristics of another species in order to appear less attractive to predators. This form of mimicry is often seen in butterflies, moths, and other insects, as well as in some snakes and lizards. This type of mimicry is believed to be an evolutionary adaptation in order to reduce the risk of becoming prey for predators. In some cases, the mimicry is so effective that predators are unable to distinguish between the mimic and the species it is mimicking. In other cases, predators may still be able to distinguish between the two, but they may be less likely to attack the mimic than the original species. Number 8. Etymology. The term, defensive mimicry, was first used by A.R. Wallace in 1889. The term is derived from the Latin, mimicos, meaning, imitator. Wallace was inspired by the behavior of certain animals which sought to deceive predators by copying the behavior and color patterns of their predators. This strategy of deceptive mimicry allowed the animals to avoid being detected and eaten by the predators. Wallace argued that the mimicry was an evolutionary adaptation to increase the chances of survival and avoid predation. Number 7. BATESIAN mimicry. BATESIAN mimicry is a type of defensive mimicry where a harmless species of animal mimics the warning signals of a harmful species. This type of mimicry is named after the evolutionary biologist Henry Walter Bates. It occurs when a harmless species gains protection from predation by mimicking the warning signals of a harmful species. This type of mimicry can be seen in many species of butterflies, where a harmless species has evolved to mimic the warning signals of a more dangerous species. The mimic is usually less common than the model, which makes it easier for predators to recognize and avoid it. This type of mimicry is beneficial to both the mimic and the model since it increases the chances of both species surviving. By mimicking a harmful species, the harmless species is able to avoid predators, while the model species benefits from the decreased predation of its mimic. Number 6. Müllerian mimicry. Müllerian mimicry is a type of defensive mimicry in which two or more species of noxious or unpalatable animals share an identical or similar coloration or pattern as an evolutionary adaptation. This form of mimicry was first described by German naturalist Fritz Müller in 1878. The idea behind the mimicry is that a potential predator who has learned to avoid one of the species will also avoid the other species, thus providing mutual defense against predators. The species of animals that engage in Müllerian mimicry usually have independently evolved a shared noxious quality that has made them unpalatable or toxic to predators, such as bright colors, bad tastes, or noxious odors. Examples of animals that engage in Müllerian mimicry include monarch butterflies, wasps, and some species of poisonous frogs. Number 5. Mertensian mimicry. Mertensian mimicry is a type of defensive mimicry found in animals where the mimic is highly poisonous and the model is not. This type of mimicry is named for the German zoologist Robert Mertens, who first described it in 1958. The most famous example of Mertensian mimicry is the mimicry of the non-toxic monarch butterfly by the toxic viceroy butterfly. The viceroy has evolved to look remarkably like the monarch, so that predators will avoid it as they would the monarch. This type of mimicry is different from Müllerian mimicry, which involves two or more toxic species that share similar warning signals. Number 4. WASMANNIAN mimicry. WASMANNIAN mimicry, also known as symbiotic mimicry, is a type of defensive mimicry in which one organism resembles another organism that is more toxic or dangerous to predators. This type of mimicry is named after German entomologist and priest Father Johann Carl Wilhelm Wassmann, 1859 to 1931. It occurs when an organism, usually an insect, associates with a more dangerous species that is better defended against predators. The organism that is mimicking the more dangerous species gains protection from predation by appearing to be a part of the more dangerous species. For example, some ant species have evolved to mimic the look and behavior of wasps so that they are not as easily preyed upon. In this type of mimicry, the predator becomes confused and may be less likely to attack the mimicking species. Number 3. Vavilovian mimicry. Vavilovian mimicry is a form of defensive mimicry in which two or more species of animals have evolved to share a similar appearance even though they are not closely related. This phenomenon occurs when predators learn to associate a certain pattern or coloration with a bitter taste or bad experience. As a result, the appearance of the unrelated species causes the predator to think twice before attacking. Vavilovian mimicry is named after the Russian plant geneticist Nikolai Vavilov, who first observed the phenomenon in his research on plant evolution. Examples of Vavilovian mimicry include the mimicry of bees and wasps by other species of fly, and the mimicry of wasps by some butterflies and moths. Number 2. Gilbertian mimicry. Gilbertian mimicry is a form of defensive mimicry found in animals. It is named after the British evolutionary biologist, N.B. Gilbert, who first described the phenomenon. The key feature of Gilbertian mimicry is that two or more unpalatable or toxic species mimic each other to gain protection from predators. This type of mimicry is believed to be an evolutionary adaptation that increases the chances of survival of the species involved. It works by providing visual warning cues for predators, who then become conditioned to avoid the mimicking species. This type of mimicry also works to protect the imitating species because predators become less likely to attack them if another species has previously made them sick. Gilbertian mimicry is a great example of how animals have evolved to protect themselves from predation. Number 1. Browerian mimicry. Browerian mimicry is a type of defensive mimicry in which a palatable species has evolved to mimic an unpalatable species to avoid predation. It is named after Lincoln Brower, the scientist who first proposed it in the 1950s. In Browerian mimicry, an edible species has evolved to resemble an inedible species in order to protect itself from predators. The edible species may mimic the inedible species in terms of color, shape, and behavior. The two species are often found together in the same area, so predators will learn to avoid both species. This provides greater protection for the edible species, as predators will avoid it without having to learn to distinguish between the two. Hey there! Thanks for watching the video about curiosities about defensive mimicry in animals. If you're curious to learn more about the amazing creatures that inhabit our planet, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell button so you don't miss a single episode. We'll be back soon with more educational videos about exciting curiosities around the world. Until then, stay curious.